Now it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Shikhar Malhotra to the stage. Mr. Malhotra stands as Vice Chairman and CEO of HCL Healthcare, one of India's largest corporate health solutions firms, providing end-to-end healthcare solutions with a vision to make corporate India healthier. He is a trustee of the Shiv Nadar Foundation, where he plays multiple roles, including shaping its vision of nation building through transformational leadership. Shikhar is also the founding CEO of Shiv Nadar Schools, having led them to become one of the most coveted schools in India. In September 2018, he took over the role of the Pro-Chancellor of Shiv Nadar University, India's youngest university, chosen as an institution of eminence by the government of India. He co-founded the Habitats Trust in 2018 with his wife Roshni and helped support India's conservation agenda. I'd also like to note that it is my sincere pleasure to welcome my friend and colleague, Mr. Jim McLaughlin, co-chair of the IC3 movement, up to the stage to steer a fun fireside chat with Mr. and Mrs. Malhotra.
No. Yeah, let me be here with you. Okay, I've got the lapel mic. Can you hear? Okay. Yeah, Roshni, thank you so much, and Shikhar, welcome to IC3. We're delighted to be here. This is actually the first, sort of fireside chat that we've done, and I think this is a yeah, you have the fire here. Get comfortable. We may be here all day. We're already a little bit over time, but I think let's have some fun and enjoy. I was just noticing, I think it was Sumit who went to Penn State in my neck of the woods. I don't know if he's still there. I'm in Philadelphia. We'd love to. Yeah, perhaps we can connect. But again, welcome. I know everyone here is already very inspired by your work. I was thinking, to kick off the conversation, as we progress in our lives, it's, what we can't help but think about the foundation that we've gotten. So with a focus on education, counseling, as you look back at your own education journeys, what reflections do you have now when you're thinking about school, when you're thinking about university, of course, Roshni with Northwestern and Kellogg, and Babson? Any reflections that you have as we
our own personal journey?
Yeah, your personal journeys. I think that, for here, it would be great for us to hear a little bit about that as we start.
Okay, sure. You want to go first? Okay. Can you hear me? All right. So firstly, thank you for having us here today. I know that our team always looks forward to the IC3 conference as one of sort of, the milestones of the year. And I'm going to take a leaf out of Ganesh's book and say that, I myself have a lot of gratitude for being here today and being healthy and in one shape, right? And, just like all of you, I know it's been a pretty grueling period, so it just feels, delightful to be here in a room full of people, and we're doubly blessed that they're all in education, right? So I actually had a bit of an unusual upbringing. I grew up in Kuwait, and I studied at an international school in Kuwait, and then I moved to India during the Gulf War. So I was there for that period, and then I came, and that's where my tryst with India sort of began, at least in education. I was just about 7 years old, and then I went to the British school here for 2 years. I went back to complete my education in Kuwait. I then went on to study at Babson, and then I came back to India. But I think education is, at least in my personal journey, massively transformed. The educators certainly were content creators, and they were domain experts when I was growing up. And when I look at the schools now, and at least I've had the privilege of seeing Shiv Nadar School up front. I've also traveled, with Gopal, who's the CEO of Shiv Nadar School, to about 20 odd schools. And it was interesting because we deliberately went to sort of the legacy schools, we went to the established, and we went to the up and coming. just to see how they behave differently and how are people different from each other. And that was a fascinating experience because we essentially took the best from each three and sort of, helped our thinking be modeled and shaped around that. There were a few things that I knew that I didn't want to do. I went to a school which was very unusual. Actually, in all of their wisdom, at that time, they felt that, this is while I was in school in Kuwait, that they're going to put the students in order of rank across the entire class and with 5 sections. So you're in section A, B, C, D, E. And I was always in A, except I was always the bottom of A. And I was stoically bottom. Like I was just rooted at number 25 out of 25. And when your life is your section, it's not really the class, right? You know your peers extremely well. And I don't know how I managed to cling on to that. So from a perspective point of view, I was 25 out of 125, but that's not good enough because inside the class and my mother would let me have it, right? Like, why can't you move up a couple of notches? And I said, well, what good is that going to do? So I think that, shaped my thinking. I went through stages of denial, right, of like embarrassment and everything to the point where I just didn't care anymore. And that's when I really started actually playing a lot of sports. And I think that I played practically every sport there was to play. I played it about 6 hours a day. And that was really my outlet, to let go of a little bit of that frustration. So at least I'm glad to see that's not happening anymore, right? At least in the education space. It weighs down on an individual in that sense. So I sort of outgrew schools. I was really itching to get out of schools. And when I went to Babson, it was refreshing because I think, that way, America is refreshing. It's open, it's collegial, you can debate, you can challenge things. And it was in an environment where I really thrived. It was an entrepreneurship. So, which is really what my sort of calling was. There are a lot of things in life I didn't know. I still don't know. But one of the things that I knew was that I want to study entrepreneurship. And I was fortunate enough to have that experience at Babson. That really shaped a lot of my thinking. It actually only propelled a lot of the thinking and the behavior around what entrepreneurs do. And just being in that environment actually was a tremendous blessing. So I was able to use at least that part of my education when I came here to India and really branch out into different areas. I never thought that I would land up in education. With my, the joke is that I'm a B grade student with A grade people inside the organization, and somehow they're very tolerating of me, which I'm very humbled about.
Thanks, Shikhar. I'm sure there's a lot of humility in there, but we'll say that. So Roshni, as you think about your journey, I'll phrase this in a little bit of a different way. What stands out to you from a guidance perspective, and that's why we're all here and thinking about direction and purpose. Where did that purpose, guidance, direction come in for you?
I think even as a student in school or my undergraduate education at Northwestern, I think the teachers around me, my parents as well, I think one of the what stands out is the amount of freedom I was given. And when I mean freedom, I think, in school, of course, I was academically, I would say, average, but I was allowed to, even by my teachers, and without much pressure from my parents, to do a lot of extracurricular activities. And I think today that is probably formed me much more as an individual than academics. So whether it was music, it was drama, it was sports, I remember myself being involved quite a bit in school, and I think that shaped me. So I do give credit to freedom and allowing me to do that in school. When I reached Northwestern, I reached the College of Arts and Sciences. I was a commerce student in school. I thought I would do economics. Somewhere halfway down the sophomore year, I transferred to the School of Speech, now School of Communication, it's changed, School of Speech, and I pursued a major in radio, television, and film, which was very different. when I was coming back every summer. One summer I came back, I was working for CNBC in Delhi. One summer I was working for CNN, Good Morning America with Paul Azan in New York. After I graduated from Northwestern, for about 2 years, I was working as a production assistant and then news producer at Sky News. So I think what my educators as well as my parents were able to give me was a lot of freedom. I mean, things only got serious when business school came along. And then after that, I joined HCL, and then I had to learn completely differently. But I think till age 25, allowing that freedom perhaps allowed me to expand my mind and be a lot more open. And I still remember my first class at business school in Kellogg, statistics. And we get into the class, and I remember Professor Scott McEwen, and we have about 35 to 40 students in class, ex-investment bankers, consultants, people from the marketing world, then me. And Scott McEwen asked that which one of you has never used Excel? And I still remember the only hand that went up was mine. And then he said, why? And I said, have you ever used a production camera? And he said, no. So I said, exactly. I mean, I've come from film and television and media. So, but it was interesting because today, I mean, our life will be incomplete without Excel and anything financial tool related. But I was just reflecting. So I think it was a diverse background. It was a freedom to explore, and I think I really think that that's what's integral for students today.
So 2 takeaways there. 1, it all comes back to the Google Sheet, it seems. 2 is that for both of you, it seems your passion and direction in many ways came in experiences that happened outside of the classroom. So my next question is about, I think one of the biggest challenges that we hear from principals, school leaders, university leaders, and students alike is that they're focusing so much on examinations, standardized tests. How can we as leaders, and that's important, but how can we as school leaders ensure that schools are also laboratories for leadership development and developing the whole person?
When I come back to that story where actually we traveled to, I think it was 7 or 8 cities looking at these different schools where I categorize them into the legacy, into the established, and then legacy, I'm saying schools that were more than 70, 80 years old, the established that were maybe 20 to 40 years old, and then the up and coming, which were maybe 5 to 10 years. And one of our takeaways actually from that visit was that what is the culture of those places, right? Because the culture actually dictates a lot of what gets done and how people think and how people behave, and then what kind of risks they're willing to take, what kind of risks they're not willing to take. And what was very clear was that at least the younger schools were really channelizing creativity, and they were really trying to even almost institutionalize it, so that it's not just words, but it's actually drilled into action, into behavior, into schedules, into class time, into even outcomes where creativity was being rewarded, and if the creativity is not there, they were being encouraged, right? And so that was really, it was really interesting to see, and I think that, with the surge of new schools that were opening up, and this is, I'm talking about, I think it was 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and more schools have actually opened up. And I think the refreshing thing that actually has been is that all schools have really imbibed creativity in some shape and form, because once they do that, they're essentially getting out of the student's way, right? Because children are inherently creative. They stop getting creative, over time and over years. And that was actually really interesting to see. So I think that, if schools actually begin to recognize creativity as an equal of just examinations, and other facets that go side by side with creativity, actually then you almost end up institutionalizing different strengths of the individual rather than just their exam-taking prowess. And of course, a lot of schools do that. I know the Shivnada school does that, and the exam-taking process. Interestingly, it sort of narrows down where in the senior years where it becomes more exams. But if you look at universities across the world, they're taking students in on the basis of a whole range of skills that individuals are meant to carry now. Because in the real world, what they're clearly saying is that you could be academically extremely bright, but you're gonna find challenges if you've not built other skills and other strengths in your armor. And Indian universities, I think, are beginning to at least take up and take notice with that. And at least the change has started. I think the interesting thing will be to see that how fast is that change, right? So directionally, I think it's calibrating a little bit, but the speed really needs to pick up actually over there, because what we're going to end up doing here, I think other people will take notice, and then they're going to start actually mimicking that behavior as well. So maybe in a few years' time, this could very well be the change that we all need.
I actually, I think the standardized tests is something which is extremely important. And the only reason I say that is because had there not been standardized tests, my Vidya Gyan students would never make it. All your students would, but my kids won't. So, it levels out the playing field at those important interventions in life. However, I think where you can build in some of that thrust of leadership and all that learning that happens outside academics and outside the classrooms is really in the formative junior years of school. So I think even if I reflect on our own Shivnada schools or my own experience, by the time 10, 11, 12 came, of course, a lot more of the focus was on college admissions, getting, focusing on getting the good grades, the tests that one had to prepare for to get to good colleges. But the beauty about school is 12 years, unlike universities, which are 4. So if you remove just the top 2 years, 11 and 12 or 10, you've still got a good 6 to 7 years where there is so much you can do. So I think the middle school becomes the playground for the teachers, the counselor, for the students to really explore and build on a lot of the leadership qualities. And the same thing with life. I mean, there'll be times when you can take it easy, but if you're in a company, you're always working towards certain standardized targets and goals and metrics. So I think while that is going to remain, and that's going to be important because performance is always measured in comparison to someone else and not in isolation, I think the development is, you get windows for development. So in life as well as in school, you get windows for development and really to explore and be free. And you have to facilitate a culture and an environment to be able to seize that.
So if we can, I'd like to pose maybe one or two more, and thank you for that. So as we think about careers, right, of course there's education and then there's the world of work. The last 18 months, we've seen incredible change and so much innovation happening in schools and universities, largely because we've had to. We've been forced to do that, but also this is changing the world of work in significant ways. So from your perspectives, as leaders, how are careers and the kinds of skills and competencies that we'll need in this world that we now live in, how is that changing on the front end?
So I think that firstly, we're in a very unusual situation where the demand is outstripping the supply many, many folds. So I think that for people in careers, even young graduates who join a company today may not be at the same organization a year or two from now because there's just so much demand. There are also so many opportunities where you can upskill, and you constantly build in, you keep enhancing your CV because you do this certification program and you do that certification program. So I think that it's actually been a much tougher environment for employers than it has been for people in the workforce. But I think it begs the question then that who would be the next leaders in a company, or who would be the next leaders in general, because one of the metrics for leadership that we have often relied on in the past years has been experience and has been tenure. And most people who go into leadership positions have had a certain length of experience and a certain tenure. However, now people are changing jobs every 2 years, or they're looking to change fields every 2 years. The companies such as ours as well, but especially technology companies, are also challenging why higher education at all. That is the other thing. So they're willing to take digital natives, students who've grown up in technology, to come and work from them immediately out of school and give them certification programs. So I think the world is going through a drastic change. So the role of the school actually becomes even more powerful. And you have to almost say that there are some opportunities our students would have gotten in university. How can we, pull those out and actually introduce them in school? So I almost feel that even school curriculums are going to go through some sort of deep diving and thinking of what a student requires, career skills, which normally would be something which would be left for higher education, but you have to do it now. And those are tangible as well as intangible. So, I think that the cycle is getting pushed back into schools a lot more.
Shikhar, anything to add?
Firstly, a caveat, I don't think career counseling is exclusive to students, okay, because the people who are, the adults in the room probably need career counseling as much as maybe students do. So maybe there's a bit of maybe there's an opportunity there for you, Ganesh, okay, the next conference for the young adults. No, middle-aged, or the middle-aged, right? No, it's true, because when I speak to a lot of young people at even HCL, and many of them, many are still figuring out what they want to do. And I think that, you're on this journey to figure out what you want to do all the way maybe sometimes till you're like 30, 35, and then before you sort of accept, life as it is, right? And I think that largely because, and I think, you pointed it out, I think Ganesh pointed it out in his speech as well, is that you're sort of, you just toe the line and you sort of kick the can down the road before you land up in a place, and you land up in an occupation, and then you wonder, what the hell am I doing here, right? And so I think career counseling, firstly, it should be mandatory in every single school. And if you can just provide exposure to different things out there. So you've got, in any given school, if you've got 2,000 students, that means you've got 4,000 parents, different occupations, different worlds of experiences. If you just bring all of them together, at the base level, you could actually just introduce students to a whole different range of professions. And we did that a little bit at Shivnada School. So there are students that are working at veterinary clinics for a fortnight. They're working at at finance houses. They're working at hospitals. They're working in companies like Zomato and things like that. And it's just interesting because just the sheer rigor of waking up, getting ready, going where you have to, and being accountable to someone else is just so interesting. It's such a interesting experience for them that if you think about it, they actually don't get that experience till they're 21, till they graduate from college. And so this opens up a whole line of questioning for them. And they start thinking that, oh wait, why am I actually interested in engineering, or why am I interested in finance? We sent some students, by the way, to some venture capital firms. They got the poorest feedback. Okay, so what was really interesting was that students really wanted to roll up the sleeves and get their hands dirty. They really wanted to have experiential learning, on-ground learning. And so that actually was the most interesting feedback. So just sorting out the basics, and if you can democratize counseling to a very large extent, which is just through mere exposure, it could actually solve a lot of the challenges that career counseling anyway has to deal with later on, because you're trying to fix something which is ring-fenced. It becomes more challenging to sort of fix those things. So I think, you know, democratizing career counseling is certainly the need of the hour.
Well, that's why we're all here, and I think we could stay all day and chat, I know, and you've been very generous with your time. Roshni, I've just got one final question for you. You know, we heard about Vidyagyan and your work there. I think very inspirational in some of the pieces that you brought forth. We will take back as school leaders, university leaders. What's the biggest takeaway that you can share with our educators joining from around the world in terms of establishing that institution, establishing that school and that mindset, whether that's for a new school or for one that's been around for quite some time? What's the biggest takeaway that you'd share?
I think it's a fairly young school. It's only 11 years, and I'm hoping to start another Vidyagyan in the state of Tamil Nadu in another year and a half as well. I think patience is one of the takeaways. You know, all the teachers, Mr. Banerjee, our founding principal, who's here of Vidyagyan, himself came from, you know, the physics department of DPS Noida. You know, so I think all the educators have also never had to be in a classroom with children who are rural and underprivileged, who did not know English, require a lot of pastoral care, you know, come from families where their parents value education but uneducated. They're a first generation learner. So, you know, there are lots of uncertainties. I think, you know, normally in education, especially in school education, there are certainties. So I think Vidyagyan was a social experiment that we started. We did not know how these children would do. I mean, even that sentence that one of them will go on to become a Nobel laureate and a prime minister. You don't know that when a 10 or 11-year-old child from rural India comes into your door, you know, and you're still trying to get them to learn to use a Western style toilet and brush their hair. You know, so you're completely away from Stanford at that point. And even then, we've been there at it for 11 years, and now we've got students at a Stanford or a Cornell or at IIT Bombay. So, you know, even in the IITs, they're different. IIM Indore, we've got one student doing the integrated 5-year program. So I think that you don't know. So, you know, Vidyagyan, and I think today educators, even the ones in this room, again, in their own ways, as you said, the world has changed so much in the last 18 months. We're at a point of uncertainty. So I think to embrace that uncertainty and have a long-term vision, sometimes it may take a short time, sometimes it may take longer. You know, you're working, it's not a company, you're not working with a product, you're working with children. So, you know, how they evolve and how they respond to the environment as is today is going to be the repercussions of what has happened in the last 18 months and kids not being back at school will have very long-term repercussions. So we don't know how they're going to be. So I think be comfortable with uncertainty, be comfortable with not knowing. And hopefully the cards will eventually fall in the right place.
The founder of the school, Shiv Nadar, I think he consistently asks this question to every one of the institutes that, are the students resilient? And he's been asking, and I know that resilience has really become in vogue, especially over the last 2 years, but he's been asking the question since 2008. And the last time he asked this question, and you know, it was interesting, he's changed the wording. He says, are they battle ready? But I think what he really means is that that's a timeless quality, right? And so you can do everything, but if they cannot take the heat in the kitchen, then you know you need to address that first. So it's extremely important in the world that we're going to live in for them to thrive. They've got to be resilient, and I think that's in every one of the institutions. And that's probably one of the greatest qualities, and the last 2 years has certainly shown that.
Shikhar, Roshni, I hope this is the first of many chats that we have. Can I just ask for a round of applause for Shikhar and Roshni for joining us? Thank you on behalf of the entire IC3 family for joining us here at the conference to celebrate the milestone. Thank you for being here.